"Sir, I think you might be in the wrong place. The auto repair shop is a few blocks from here." The salesman's condescending smile sliced through the air-conditioned atmosphere of the Mercedes-Benz dealership like a blade. James Thompson stood still, his calloused hands resting gently on the polished marble counter. His blue coveralls, worn from years of honest labor, sharply contrasted with the tailored Italian suits of the salesman bustling around the showroom. The silence that followed was deafening. "Actually," James replied calmly, his brown eyes locked on the salesman, "I'm here to buy the AMG GT Black Series." His voice, though soft, carried the weight of 20 years of experience and recognition in the world of supercars. The salesman, Marcus Williams, let out a nervous chuckle, exchanging glances with his colleagues. The showroom, with its gleaming cars and reflective floors, seemed to freeze in that moment. To them, James was just another ordinary mechanic, someone who clearly didn't belong in this world of luxury and sophistication. "Mr. Thompson, is it?" Marcus consulted the business card James had handed him moments earlier, his voice now dripping with disdain and contempt, treating James as though he were lost and out of his depth in society. Then Marcus spoke. "This particular model costs over $200,000. Perhaps I could show you something more, fitting for your profile?" The words hung in the air like a veiled insult. James felt the familiar tightness in his chest, not from embarrassment but from profound disappointment in the superficial judgment he faced. That moment, however, was just the beginning of a story that would change the lives of everyone present. 24 hours earlier, James had been in his workshop, his hands deep in the engine of a Bugatti Chiron worth over $3 million. The car's owner, a real estate magnate, anxiously awaited his diagnosis. It was the third specialist the owner had consulted to resolve an issue no one else could identify. "Mr. Anderson," James said, emerging from under the hood with a faint smile, "I've found the problem. The fuel injection system calibration is slightly off, causing the vibration you mentioned. I can have it fixed by the end of the day." The businessman's face lit up with relief. "James, you're truly extraordinary. Now I understand why every collector insists on coming to you." It was a typical scene in James's workshop. His reputation transcended social barriers and appearances. The wealthiest and most powerful car collectors on the East Coast trusted him exclusively to care for their prized vehicles. His waiting list was as long as it was prestigious. On his simple desk, tucked away in a corner of the workshop, a pile of business cards told stories of trust and excellence. CEOs, entrepreneurs, celebrities, all sought his skilled hands and almost otherworldly understanding of the most complex engines in the world. James had built his reputation over 2 decades of tireless work. He started as an apprentice at 16, spending nights poring over technical manuals and intricate diagrams. His dedication led him to specialize in the most exclusive and challenging cars on the market. While other mechanics shied away from the complexity of modern supercars, James delved deeper, deciphering every system, every component, every challenge. His workshop, located in an unassuming building in the industrial district, lacked the glamour of luxury dealerships. Its walls were adorned with technical diagrams rather than artwork, and its floors bore the marks of years of hard work. But for those familiar with the world of high-performance cars, this simple space was more valuable than any luxurious showroom. "James," called Sarah, his administrative assistant, breaking his train of thought. "Mr. Laurent from France is on the phone. His Koenigsegg is acting up, and he wants to bring it over personally next week." Cases like this were routine. Clients crossed continents to have their cars in James's hands. His reputation knew no boundaries, built on a solid foundation of exceptional competence and unwavering integrity. That evening, after resolving the Bugatti's issue, James sat alone in the workshop, contemplating his decision. The Mercedes-AMG GT Black Series wouldn't just be another car. It would be the realization of a dream nurtured since his early days as a mechanic. Every drop of sweat, every sleepless night studying, every challenge overcome had led him to this moment. His bank account reflected years of hard work and prudent financial management. He lived modestly, not out of necessity but by choice. His passion was always about the cars, not the social status they symbolized. Most of his earnings were reinvested into specialized tools and advanced training, ensuring he stayed ahead of the latest technological innovations in the industry. As he organized his tools, James smiled, recalling the remarks of his closest clients. "You should have your own collection of supercars," they often said. But James had always preferred to keep a low profile, finding satisfaction in making other people's cars run perfectly. Now, however, it was different. It wasn't just about buying a car, it was about asserting his place in a world that often judged people by appearances. The Mercedes wouldn't just be a vehicle, it would be a silent statement that a person's worth wasn't defined by the clothes they wore or the image they presented. The next morning, before heading to the dealership, James took a moment to examine his reflection in the mirror. His blue coveralls were clean but bore clear signs of use. The gray at his temples and the fine lines around his eyes told the story of countless hours spent bent over complex engines. He decided to go just as he was, authentic without pretense. And so, we return to the present moment at the dealership, where Marcus Williams and his colleagues watched in disbelief as the man in coveralls dared to dream of owning one of the brand's most exclusive cars. What they didn't know was that this seemingly trivial moment was about to turn into a lesson they would never forget. James took a deep breath, maintaining the composure that defined him, even in the most challenging situations. His response to the salesman's disdain would be more eloquent than any words. A lesson in respect, dignity, and the dangers of judging a book by its cover. A person's true worth, after all, was rarely visible on the surface. Turning his back on Marcus's smug smile, James walked with purpose across the dealership's gleaming floor. The silence trailing him carried the weight of years of superficial judgments, but his posture remained unshaken. 2 decades of repairing some of the world's most exclusive cars had taught him that dignity wasn't measured by the clothes you wore. "Sir? One moment, please." The soft, professional voice reached him just as he was about to touch the door handle. James turned, meeting the direct and warm gaze of a middle-aged woman. Her elegantly styled gray hair and a gold name tag identified her as Susan Mitchell, Senior Sales Manager. Susan's genuine smile softened her face as she continued, "I couldn't help but notice your interest in the AMG GT Black Series. Would you like to take a closer look?" The contrast between her approach and the earlier attitude of the sales team was stark. Where there had been disdain, there was now respect. Where there had been arrogance, there was now a genuine professional interest. James felt a familiar warmth in his chest, the same feeling he experienced when solving a particularly challenging problem in a complex engine. "You know," Susan began as she guided him through the showroom, "I've learned over the years that appearances can be incredibly misleading in this business. I've sold luxury cars to programmers in flip-flops and shorts, and I've lost sales to people in expensive Italian suits." Her comment drew a faint smile from James. "People are far more complex than they seem at first glance," he replied, his eyes fixed on the black Mercedes that stood majestically under the showroom lights. "Just like the cars I work on." The Black Series was a masterpiece of German engineering. Its aggressive lines told a story of power and precision, one that James knew intimately. He approached the car with the reverence of someone who truly understood the value of what was before him. "The 4-liter V8 bi-turbo engine is a true work of art," James commented, running his hand gently over the hood. "The way Mercedes redesigned the cooling system for this specific model is fascinating. I had the privilege of working on one recently. The fine-tuning of the turbo pressure requires a deep understanding of the system." Susan paused, her pen hovering above her notepad, her eyes widening slightly. "Wait a minute. Are you James Thompson? From Thompson Specialist Motors?" The surprise in her voice was unmistakable, and James nodded modestly. The recognition brought a new dimension to the interaction, shifting the dynamic entirely. "My goodness," Susan said, letting out a soft laugh. "Richard Anderson can't stop talking about you. Just last week he was telling me how you saved his Bugatti when no one else could figure out the problem." The mention of Richard's name made James smile. The businessman was one of his oldest and most loyal clients. Richard is a man who understands that the true value of a car goes beyond its price. He treats every vehicle in his collection with genuine respect. Susan led James to her office, a cozy space decorated with miniature models of both classic and modern cars. On the walls, black and white photographs told the story of the evolution of automobiles over the decades. It was a sanctuary dedicated not only to the cars but to the passion they represented. "Before we continue," Susan said, gently closing the door behind them, "I need to apologize for the treatment you received today. This is not how we conduct our business, and I'm truly sorry you had to experience that." The sincerity in her voice touched James more deeply than he had expected. "You know, Susan," he began, sitting down in the leather chair she had offered, "I've spent my whole life proving that value and appearance are two very different things. Every car that comes into my shop has a unique story, a specific set of challenges. I've learned never to underestimate what's under the hood, whether it's of a car or a person." The next 2 hours turned into a profound conversation not just about technical specifications, but about passion, dedication, and the pursuit of excellence. Susan shared stories from her 25 years selling luxury cars, the lessons she had learned, and the biases she had overcome. James, in turn, spoke about his journey from apprentice to becoming one of the most respected mechanics in the country. "I started washing cars when I was 16, he said, his eyes drifting into memories. "I'd spend nights studying technical manuals, taking apart and rebuilding engines in my garage. My dad said I had a gift, not just for fixing machines but for truly understanding them." Susan listened intently, realizing she was sitting across from someone who had transformed his craft into an art form. "And now," she asked gently, "why the Black Series?" James smiled, a smile that lit up his entire face. "Because it represents everything I believe in. It's a car that combines raw power with surgical precision, strength with elegance. It's not just about speed or status, it's about the pursuit of perfection in every detail." As they discussed the car's specifications, James noticed that Marcus and the other salespeople were occasionally throwing curious glances through the office's glass walls. The man they had dismissed so quickly was now deeply engaged in a detailed conversation with the senior manager about technical specifics they could barely comprehend. "The adaptive suspension system is particularly impressive," James commented, analyzing the technical diagrams that Susan had spread out on the table. "The way it adjusts in real time to track conditions shows a level of engineering that few can achieve." Susan watched the gleam in James's eyes as he spoke, recognizing in him the same passion that had driven her to build her own career in the world of luxury cars. "You know, James," she said, "in all these years selling cars, I've rarely met someone who understands so deeply not just the mechanics, but the soul of these vehicles." The afternoon passed as they finalized the details of the order. The Black Series would be built exactly as James had dreamed, metallic black with a black and red leather interior, each option selected not for ostentation but for purpose. It was the materialization of a dream nurtured over decades of dedicated work. When they finally stood to leave, Susan extended her hand to James with a warm smile. "It will be an honor to have you as a client, Mr. Thompson. And if I may say, your story is a powerful reminder that excellence and character are the true measures of a person." In the parking lot, James stopped beside his Honda Civic. The car, though modest, was impeccably maintained, a testament to his respect for all vehicles regardless of their market value. As he turned the key in the ignition, his thoughts returned to his shop, where a Porsche 911 GT3 awaited diagnosis. The decision to purchase the Mercedes had become something bigger than the fulfillment of a personal dream. It had turned into a statement about breaking stereotypes, about challenging limiting expectations. It was a reminder that true respect doesn't come from appearances or possessions, but from character and excellence in everything we do. That night, as he closed the shop, James glanced at the photo of the Mercedes-AMG GT Black Series on his office wall. In 8 weeks, the car would be ready, not just a symbol of success, but a testament to the power of perseverance and dignity in the face of prejudice. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new cars to fix, new problems to solve. But now, each day brought him one step closer to a dream that was about to come true. A dream that would prove that the true value of a person goes far beyond superficial appearances. In the stillness of the morning, before the sun even touched the tall windows of his workshop, James was preparing for another day of work. The familiar aroma of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the distinctive scent of oil and metal, creating an atmosphere that, to him, meant home. Sarah, his longtime assistant, was organizing the day's schedule when the phone rang, bringing a surprise no one expected. "James," Sarah called, her voice carrying a note of curiosity, "Marcus Williams from the Mercedes dealership is on the line." The name caused a brief pause in James's skilled hands, which were adjusting a specialized tool. Marcus, the same salesman who had treated him with such disdain weeks ago. James picked up the phone, his voice calm and professional, masking his surprise. "Mr. Thompson," Marcus's voice sounded different, stripped of its previous arrogance. "I know I have no right to ask this, but we need your help." Before James could respond, the powerful rumble of a familiar engine filled the space of the workshop. An Aston Martin DB11 slid in, followed by a Mercedes-Benz that he immediately recognized. Susan Mitchell, the dealership manager, emerged from the Mercedes with her characteristic elegance, while Alexander Rivers, a regular client, hurriedly stepped out of the Aston Martin. "James, thank God you're here," Alexander approached, concern evident on his face. The car started making a strange noise on the road. "I have a crucial meeting in 2 hours with international investors. And I came personally to bring you news about your Black Series," Susan added, a sleek leather folder in her hands. Her eyes scanned the workshop with genuine interest, absorbing the details that made this place a sanctuary for the world's most exceptional cars. James hung up the phone with Marcus, promising to return later. He approached the Aston Martin, his experienced fingers sliding over the hood with reverence. To him, every car was a unique story, a puzzle waiting to be solved. "Sarah, could you show Susan to our meeting room?" James asked, already focused on diagnosing the DB11. The sound of the engine told a story that few could understand, but to James, it was as clear as crystal. Minutes later, he emerged from under the hood with an accurate diagnosis. The alternator belt is starting to show signs of wear. It's not critical yet, but it needs to be replaced before it causes bigger problems. "I can take care of it in an hour." In the small meeting room, Susan waited with an expression that suggested more than just updates about the Mercedes. The room, though modest, told a story of dedication through the photographs and certificates that adorned its walls. "James," Susan began when he joined her, "something extraordinary happened after your visit to the dealership." Marcus spent the whole night reflecting on his behavior. The next morning he was in my office at 7 o'clock, not only to apologize but to make a confession. James poured coffee for both of them as Susan continued. He told me his story, how he grew up dreaming of luxury cars, but from a simple family where that dream seemed impossible. When he finally got the job at the dealership, he promised himself he would never again be seen as less than perfect. That fear of inadequacy turned him into exactly the type of person he used to fear. The rich aroma of coffee filled the room as James absorbed Susan's words. "It's a familiar story," he commented softly. "Many of us start out dreaming of these cars from a distance. The difference is in how we choose to deal with that passion." "Exactly," Susan agreed, opening her folder to reveal not just the documents for the Black Series but also a detailed training program. Marcus asked to participate in an intensive technical training program. He wants to truly understand the cars he sells, not just their superficial features. "And," she paused significantly, "he would like to learn from you?" The irony of the situation wasn't lost on James. The same man who had judged him for his clothes now wanted his knowledge. It was a powerful lesson in humility and transformation. "When I started in this business," James shared, his words weighted with memories, "I had only a used toolbox and a dream. Every car that passed through my hands was an opportunity to learn, to prove my worth not through words, but through actions." Sarah gently interrupted, bringing over a folder filled with old photographs. "I found this while organizing the files," she smiled, handing the photos to James. The images told a story of dedication. Young James working in a small garage, his first clients, the first luxury cars that entrusted him with their care. Susan observed the photographs with genuine interest. "You've built something extraordinary here, James," she remarked, her eyes sweeping across the workshop through the meeting room window. "This isn't just a workshop, it's a place where the true value of cars and people is recognized." The sound of another car arriving interrupted the conversation. It was a classic Ferrari F40, a true automotive legend. The owner, a respected collector, had traveled 3 states just to have James perform the maintenance. "This is the kind of trust that's built over years," James explained to Susan, watching his team receive the Ferrari with the same care and respect they dedicated to every vehicle. "Every car that comes in here, whether it's a rare classic or a more common model, gets our full dedication." The afternoon passed with a steady stream of clients and exceptional cars. Susan stayed, fascinated by how James and his team worked with precision and passion. Each diagnosis was a lesson in expertise, each repair a demonstration of excellence. "About Marcus," James finally said as the sun began to set, "tell him I'm willing to help. But on one condition. He needs to understand that in the world of luxury cars, like in life, respect and excellence are earned through hard work and humility." Susan smiled, understanding the depth of that offer. "You're offering more than just technical knowledge, James. You're offering a chance for transformation." As Susan left, James remained in his workshop, gazing at the night sky through the tall windows. Alexander's Aston Martin had left hours earlier, running perfectly. The Ferrari F40 rested quietly in a corner, awaiting the care of the next day. His own Mercedes was still a few weeks away, but now it represented something larger than just a dream fulfilled. Sarah appeared at the door, preparing to leave. "You know you're doing something special here, don't you?" she asked softly. "You're not just fixing cars, you're fixing people." James smiled, understanding the truth in her words. In his hands, he held the old photograph of his first workshop, a nothing more than a simple garage where it all began. It was a constant reminder that the greatest transformations often start in the most unlikely places. The phone rang one last time, it was Marcus again. "Mr. Thompson?" His voice now carried a note of hope. "Susan told me about your offer. I truly appreciate the opportunity." "Marcus," James replied gently, "we all deserve a chance to grow. Tomorrow is a new day, let's start fresh." As he locked up the shop that night, James reflected on how a moment of prejudice had turned into an opportunity for change, not just for him but for everyone involved. His Mercedes would arrive soon, but the real victory was already there, in how his dignity and professionalism had turned prejudice into respect, arrogance into humility. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the empty parking lot, blending with the distant hum of the city. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new cars to fix, and now, a new chance to prove that a person's true worth goes far beyond what the eyes can see. The morning had a different shine when Marcus arrived at James's workshop. His hands trembled slightly as he held a cup of coffee bought on the way, his impeccable suit contrasting with the work environment. For the first time in his career, he felt completely out of his comfort zone. James was waiting at the entrance, dressed in his usual blue coveralls. His kind smile eased some of the tension from Marcus's shoulders. "Welcome to the reality of cars," James said softly, gesturing for the salesman to follow him. The workshop was already busy at that time of the morning. The sound of tools and voices blended with the occasional roar of engines being tested. For Marcus, it was a whole new world, no longer the sterile, shiny environment of the dealership, but a place where cars were brought back to life. "First lesson," James began, leading Marcus to a Porsche 911 GT3 that had just arrived. "Before you sell a car, you need to understand its soul. Every vehicle has a story to tell, a unique personality." Marcus watched in awe as James leaned over the Porsche's engine. The mechanic's hands moved with almost surgical precision, touching each component with respect and deep knowledge. "See this engine?" James asked, pointing to the mechanical heart of the Porsche. "It's not just a bunch of parts. It's a masterpiece of engineering that represents decades of evolution and passion. When you truly understand that, it will change the way you talk about cars with your customers." The morning passed with James sharing not just technical knowledge but also stories from his own experiences. Marcus soaked in every word, every demonstration, beginning to realize how much he had missed by only judging things by their appearance. "I remember my first day selling luxury cars," Marcus shared during a coffee break. "I was so determined to fit in, to prove my worth. I think in the process I forgot why I really wanted to work with cars in the first place." James listened closely, recognizing in Marcus the same dream that had once lived in his own heart. "You know," he replied, "I spent years being judged by the way I dressed, by where I worked. But I learned that true passion and competence speak louder than any appearance." The day moved on with a succession of extraordinary cars passing through the shop. Each one brought a new lesson, a new perspective. Marcus watched in awe as James treated every customer, whether the Porsche owner or the modest Honda owner, with the same respect and dedication. At lunch, Sarah brought sandwiches for everyone, and the team gathered in the small break area of the shop. The atmosphere was laid back, filled with laughter and shared stories. Marcus realized he was witnessing something more than just a work team. It was a family united by their passion for cars. "Tell him about the Ferrari," Sarah suggested between laughs, and James smiled, remembering the story. "It was one of my first jobs with luxury cars," James began. "A Ferrari F355 with a problem no one could fix. The owner was about to give up on the car when he gave me a chance. I spent 3 straight nights studying every aspect of that engine until I found the problem, a tiny flaw that everyone else had missed." Marcus listened intently, beginning to understand that true expertise didn't come solely from technical knowledge, but from tireless dedication and a genuine love for the work. In the afternoon, a special customer arrived at the shop, Richard Anderson, a successful businessman known for his extensive luxury car collection. To Marcus's surprise, Richard greeted James like an old friend, not just a service provider. "James, my friend," Richard smiled, "I brought the Bugatti in for that service we talked about. And I see you've got company today?" James introduced Marcus, briefly explaining the situation. Richard listened with interest, then turned to the salesman with a knowing smile. "You know, Marcus," he said, "when I met James, I learned one of the most valuable lessons of my life. True value has nothing to do with the clothes we wear or the car we drive. It's about integrity, dedication, and passion for what we do." As James worked on the Bugatti, Marcus had the opportunity to talk more with Richard, who shared stories of his own journey, from a young entrepreneur to a respected collector. "The world of luxury cars can be intimidating," Richard reflected. "It's easy to get lost in the glamour and forget the true essence of what makes these vehicles special. It's not the price or the status, it's the passion and excellence invested in every detail. At the end of the day, as the sun began to set, Marcus found himself sitting in James's office, reflecting on everything he had learned. His hands, once spotless, now bore grease stains, marks of his first attempts to truly understand the cars he sold. "James," he began, his voice heavy with emotion, "I want to apologize again for the way I treated you at the dealership. I was so focused on maintaining an image that I lost sight of what really matters." James smiled, handing Marcus a clean cloth for his hands. "You know what the best part of working with cars is?" he asked. "They don't care who you are or what you wear. They only care about the respect and dedication you give them." At that moment, the familiar sound of a powerful engine filled the workshop. Susan had arrived to pick up Marcus but stopped at the entrance, watching the scene with satisfaction. The arrogant salesman she once knew had been replaced by someone more humble, more authentic. "How was your first day?" she asked, walking up to the two men. "Transformative," Marcus replied honestly. "James isn't just teaching me about cars, he's teaching me about life, respect, and the true meaning of excellence." As Marcus and Susan said their goodbyes, James stayed in his workshop, organizing tools and reflecting on the day. His own Mercedes would be arriving soon, but now that car represented so much more than a personal achievement. It was a symbol of how life could change when people were willing to look beyond appearances and open their hearts to new perspectives. Sarah, who had stayed behind to finish some reports, approached with a cup of fresh coffee. "You did something special today, James," she commented softly. "You turned a moment of prejudice into an opportunity for growth." James nodded, taking the cup with gratitude. "Sometimes the greatest lessons in life come from the most unexpected places," he reflected. Marcus came here thinking he'd learn about cars, but he's learning about himself. The night sky gleamed through the windows of the workshop, and James smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new cars to fix, and perhaps another opportunity to show that a person's true worth goes far beyond what the eyes can see. The sun had barely risen when Marcus arrived at the workshop that Thursday. His hands, once always spotless, now showed small calluses, medals of honor from his weeks of learning. In the passenger seat of his car, an elderly man with white hair looked at the workshop with bright eyes, his wrinkled hands holding an old toolbox. James was already working on a Lamborghini when he saw them arriving. There was something different in the air, an energy suggesting that this wouldn't be an ordinary day. Susan was there too, having arrived early with news about James's Mercedes, but even that seemed secondary in the face of the scene unfolding before them. "James," Marcus called, his voice filled with a new emotion, "I want you to meet someone very special. This is Robert, my grandfather." The elderly man approached slowly, supported by his polished wooden cane. His eyes scanned the workshop with the familiarity of someone recognizing a long-lost home. "So this is the place that brought my grandson back to our family," he said softly. Sarah quickly tidied the break area, bringing fresh coffee and some comfortable chairs. Robert sat down with a sigh of gratitude, carefully placing the old toolbox on the table with reverent care. "You know, James," he began, his words heavy with memory, "there was a time when these hands knew every secret of an engine. They weren't luxury cars like these, but tractors, trucks, vehicles that kept our little town alive." Marcus stood silently, a visible tension in his shoulders. It was clear he was about to share something deep, something he had kept hidden for a long time. "When I was a child," Marcus began, his voice trembling slightly, "I spent every free moment in Grandpa's workshop. The smell of oil, the sound of tools, the satisfaction of seeing something broken come to life again. It was magical." Susan and Sarah moved closer, sensing they were about to witness something important. James watched in silence, realizing that Marcus's transformation over the past few weeks had roots much deeper than he had imagined. Robert carefully opened the toolbox. Inside, old but well-maintained tools told a story of decades of dedication. "I built my life with these tools," he explained. "I raised my family, educated my children, and dreamed that one day I would pass this legacy on." "But I disappointed you, Grandpa," Marcus interrupted, tears now flowing freely down his face. "I got lost trying to prove my worth in other ways. I traded the honesty of hard work for the superficial shine of success." Robert rose, slowly but purposefully approaching his grandson. "No, son. You never disappointed me. You just lost your way for a while. And now, thanks to James and this workshop, you found your way back." The moment was so intimate that everyone present felt tears welling up. James thought of his own father, who had taught him the first secrets of mechanics. Susan remembered her own journey, the time she had to prove her worth in a male-dominated world. When Marcus told me about these past few weeks, Robert continued, about how he was learning not just about cars, but about humility, respect, and the true value of work, my heart swelled with joy. He finally understood what I tried to teach him his whole life. James approached the old toolbox, recognizing some rare pieces, tools that told stories from a different era of mechanics. These tools, he said softly, are part of the history of our profession. Every mark of use is a lesson learned, every scratch a victory earned. Robert smiled, picking up a particularly worn wrench. This was my first tool, he explained. I bought it with my first paycheck over 50 years ago. Marcus, I want it to be yours now. The moment of handing over the tool was almost sacred. Marcus held it as if it were made of gold, his fingers tracing the marks left by decades of dedicated use. But Grandpa, he protested softly, you always said you would never part with it. And I'm not parting with it, Robert replied with a wise smile. I'm passing on a legacy. This tool carries not just memories but values, honesty, dedication, respect for a job well done. Values that you've rediscovered here with James. Susan approached James, lightly touching his arm. Your Mercedes arrived last night, she whispered. But I think you're witnessing something much more valuable here. James nodded, understanding that his workshop had become more than just a place of work. It was a place of transformation where people found not only solutions for their cars but for their lives. Robert began sharing stories from his days as a mechanic, each one a lesson about life, work, and dignity. Marcus listened with renewed attention, as if every word was filling a void he didn't even know existed. I remember one particularly tough winter, Robert said, when the only tractor in town broke down during the harvest. I spent 3 days and 3 nights working on it because I knew families depended on that machine for their livelihood. It wasn't about money or recognition, it was about making a difference in people's lives. As the morning went on, other customers began to arrive, but no one dared interrupt that moment. There was something sacred happening there, a reconnection that transcended the world of luxury cars and social status. Sarah brought more coffee and some old photos she found in the workshop archives. James in his early days as a mechanic restored cars, moments captured of quiet victories over seemingly impossible problems. Look at this, Marcus, Robert pointed to one of the photos. The same passion I see in James' eyes, the same respect for the craft. It's what I always saw in you when you were a child. And now it's coming back. As the day went on, the workshop took on a different rhythm. Marcus worked alongside James on various cars, but now there was a new dimension to his actions. Every movement was more than just technique. It was a connection to his heritage and honoring of his grandfather's legacy. When it was time for Robert to leave, he stopped at the door of the workshop, looking one last time at the space that had helped his grandson find his true path. James, he called, thank you for bringing my grandson back not just to mechanics, but to himself. That evening, after everyone had left, James stayed a little longer in the workshop. The Mercedes was waiting for him at the dealership, but the showroom seemed less important now. He had witnessed something extraordinary, the healing of a family rift, the restoration of a legacy, the transformation of a man. Sarah, packing up her things to leave, stopped beside James. You know what's most amazing? She asked softly. How sometimes we have to completely lose ourselves to find our true way back home. James smiled, looking at his own toolbox, thinking of all the stories it too carried. Tomorrow would be the day to pick up his Mercedes, but today his heart was full with something far more precious. The certainty that he had helped not only fix cars, but restore a connection that seemed lost forever. The day to pick up the Mercedes had arrived. James woke up before sunrise, a habit from years past that even this special occasion couldn't change. In his simple kitchen, he prepared his breakfast as he always did, but his hands trembled slightly, not from nervousness, but from a contained emotion that had been growing for weeks. He put on his newest blue coveralls, the ones Sarah had insisted he buy for special occasions. You can be authentic without looking sloppy, she had said with her motherly way. Looking at himself in the mirror, James smiled as he thought about how much his life had changed over the past few weeks. He arrived at the workshop earlier than usual. The morning silence was broken by the soft sound of another car approaching. It was Susan, coming to accompany him to the dealership. But she wasn't alone. To James' surprise, Marcus was with her, and in the car behind them was Robert, Marcus' grandfather, being brought by Sarah. You didn't have to come, James said, his voice betraying the emotion he felt. We did, Sarah replied with a warm smile. Some journeys are too important to be taken alone. Robert slowly approached, leaning on his cane. You know, James, last night I was thinking about how much you remind me of my own father. He was also a man who believed that true value lies in character, not appearances. The small group gathered in the workshop's break area for a quick coffee before heading to the dealership. Sarah had brought homemade cakes, and the moment had a feeling of family celebration. "James," Marcus began, his voice carrying a humility that would have been unthinkable a few weeks ago, "before we go, there's something I need to tell you. Something I discovered about myself during these weeks." Everyone turned to him, sensing the gravity of the moment. Marcus took an old photo from his pocket. It showed a young boy beside an old car, smiling while holding a screwdriver almost bigger than him. "This is me at 6 years old in my grandfather's workshop," he explained. "Back then I didn't dream of status or money. I only dreamed of making cars work, of understanding their stories, of being like my grandfather. At some point I lost sight of that boy. I let the world convince me that success only had one form." Susan gently touched Marcus' shoulder, her eyes shining with understanding. She too had faced her own battles in the luxury car world, learning to balance professionalism with authenticity. "But here in this workshop," Marcus continued, his voice choked with emotion, "I found more than just technical knowledge. I found that boy again. And I discovered that he was never really gone. He was just waiting for someone to believe in him again." Robert took his old toolbox, which was now permanently in James' workshop. "When I gave this wrench to Marcus yesterday, I wasn't just handing over a tool. I was passing on a tradition, a way of seeing the world. James, you helped make that connection happen." Sarah served more coffee as the sun began to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. James looked at that unlikely group gathered in his workshop. A transformed salesman, a wise retired mechanic, a manager who saw beyond appearances, an assistant who was more like family. Each of them had contributed to turning a moment of prejudice into a story of redemption. "Before we go," Susan said, picking up her briefcase, "there's something you need to see." She took out some photographs. They were of James' Mercedes, newly arrived at the dealership. The car was magnificent, its black paint reflecting the light like a polished mirror. "But there's more," she continued, a mysterious smile on her lips. "Last night after the car arrived, something extraordinary happened." She explained how several VIP clients of the dealership had called upon hearing that the car was for James Thompson. Many of them were his longtime clients, people who trusted only him to take care of their most precious cars. "One of them said something I'll never forget," Susan shared. "This car isn't just a Mercedes, it's a symbol of how excellence and integrity always win in the end." Robert nodded, his wrinkled hands gently stroking the old toolbox. "You know what impresses me most about you, James? It's not your skill with cars, although it's extraordinary. It's how you use that talent to bring out the best in people." Marcus stood up, adjusting his tie, not as armor for status, but as a conscious choice for professional presentation. "I think it's time," he said softly. "The car is waiting." As they prepared to leave, Sarah held James for a moment. "Wait," she said, rushing to her office. She returned with a small box, simply wrapped. "It's a gift from the team," she explained. "Something to remember this moment." Inside the box was a miniature-scale model of the Mercedes-AMG GT Black Series, identical to the car James was about to pick up. But it wasn't just a model. On the base was an engraved plaque, "For James Thompson, who taught us that the true value of a person lies in their character, not their appearance." The moment was so charged with emotion that no one could speak for several moments. It was Robert who finally broke the silence, his voice filled with wisdom. "You know, James, that this day isn't just about a car, right?" he said. "It's about how a moment of prejudice can become an opportunity for change. It's about how dignity and character can transform lives." The group left the workshop for the dealership, the morning sun now shining fully. At the dealership, a surprise awaited. Several of James' oldest clients had shown up to witness the moment. Among them was Richard Anderson with his freshly serviced Bugatti. "We couldn't miss this," Richard said with a warm smile. "It's not every day we see poetic justice in action." The moment of the key handover was almost solemn. Susan insisted that Marcus be the one to hand James the keys, a symbolic gesture of complete transformation. The hands of the two men met over the leather keychain, and for a moment, all social barriers, all prejudices, all superficial differences simply vanished. "James," Marcus said, his voice firm despite the emotion, "thank you for teaching me that true value has nothing to do with the car we drive or the clothes we wear. It's about who we choose to be, how we treat others, and the integrity we maintain even when no one is looking." When James finally sat behind the wheel of his Mercedes, he wasn't just a man fulfilling a material dream. He was the embodiment of a powerful lesson about dignity, perseverance, and the importance of staying true to oneself. Robert, watching from the side, smiled with tears in his eyes. "Look," he murmured to his grandson, "sometimes we need to lose our way to find something much more precious." The engine of the Mercedes came to life with a soft yet powerful roar. But for everyone present, the most striking sound was that of prejudice being broken, of lessons being learned, of lives being transformed. This wasn't just a new car leaving the dealership, it was a testament to the strength of character, the importance of authenticity, and the transformative power of mutual respect. 6 months had passed since that memorable morning at the dealership. The autumn painted the streets in golden hues, bringing an atmosphere of change and renewal. In James' workshop, the black Mercedes rested in a special garage, not as a symbol of status, but as a silent witness to a transformation that had touched many lives. On that special Saturday morning, the workshop breathed a different air. The familiar scent of oil and metal was replaced by the fragrance of fresh coffee and homemade cakes. Sarah had transformed the space with a personal touch, wildflowers and makeshift vases made from old engine parts, each arrangement telling its own story of beauty found in the most unlikely places. It was Marcus' graduation day from the intensive program that James had developed especially for him. But it was more than just a ceremony, it was the celebration of a circle closing, of wounds healing, of connections strengthening. Robert arrived first, his steps now firmer than 6 months ago. In his weathered hands, he carried a carefully wrapped parcel, tied with twine and brown paper, the old-fashioned way as he liked to do. His eyes shone with a special light, as though they held a precious secret. "James," he called softly, his voice trembling slightly with contained emotion. "Last night, while looking for some old tools in the attic, I found something I need to share with you." The parcel revealed an old photo album, its pages yellowed with time but preserved with care, speaking of love and precious memories. The black and white photos told the story of a small workshop in the 1960s, where a young Robert began his journey in the world of mechanics. "Look at this photo," Robert pointed to a particular image, where an older man was teaching a young Robert the secrets of an engine. "This was my father, Thomas. He taught me that every car has a soul, every engine has a story to tell. When I saw you teaching Marcus, I saw my father again." The pages of the album revealed more than just moments frozen in time, they showed a lineage of knowledge and values passed down from generation to generation. There were photos of repaired cars, of proud smiles, of hands stained with grease that had built dreams and trust. Susan arrived soon after, bringing not only her always elegant presence but also news that made her eyes shine with enthusiasm. "You won't believe what's happening at the dealership," she began, sitting down with a cup of Sarah's special coffee. "After everything we've experienced here, we've implemented significant changes. Each salesperson now spends a month learning basic mechanics. But it's more than that, they're learning about respect, about seeing beyond appearances, about understanding the true value of people." The transformation had spread like ripples on a calm lake. Other salespeople, inspired by Marcus' change, began seeking technical knowledge. The dealership, once a temple of status and appearances, was becoming a place where knowledge and respect walked hand in hand. Sarah, always attentive to details, had prepared a special surprise. On one wall of the workshop, she had created a mural with photos documenting the journey of the past 6 months. Marcus on his first day of learning, Robert sharing stories, moments of discovery and growth captured with sensitivity. "Each photo tells a story of transformation," she explained, her eyes misty. "Not just of cars being repaired but of hearts being healed, of connections being strengthened." Marcus was the last to arrive, but his entrance brought emotional smiles from everyone present. He was driving a 1957 Chevrolet, restored by his own hands under James' patient guidance and Robert's proud eyes. The car wasn't perfect. Small imperfections told the story of honest learning, of trial and error, of persistence and dedication. "This car," Marcus explained, gently running his hand over the hood, "represents my journey. Every scratch, every mark, tells a story of learning and growth. It's no longer about appearances, it's about the beauty of the process, about the honesty of manual labor." The ceremony itself was touching in its simplicity. Instead of formal speeches, each person present shared a memory, a lesson learned, a moment of transformation. The stories intertwined like threads in a tapestry rich with meaning and emotion. Richard Anderson, who had made sure to be there, brought a unique perspective. "Before, I saw my car collection only as symbols of success," he admitted. "Now, thanks to all of you, I understand that each vehicle carries stories, dreams, moments of life. They're more than machines, they're bridges that connect people." Susan shared how their story had inspired deep changes at the dealership. "We don't just sell cars anymore," she said. "We sell respect for automotive heritage, for the history each model carries, for the passion that drives this world." Robert, in his moment of speech, could barely contain his emotion. "For years, I carried the weight of thinking that our family tradition would die with me," he confessed. "Today, I see that it not only survived, but it has blossomed in ways I never imagined possible." Sarah surprised everyone by announcing the creation of a special program for young mechanics. "Inspired by everything we've experienced here," she explained, "we're going to teach more than just technical skills. We're going to pass on values of respect, dignity, and authenticity." When it was Marcus' turn to speak, the silence in the workshop was palpable. Wearing his blue overalls with genuine pride, he looked at each face present before beginning. "6 months ago, I measured success by the value of the cars I sold." His voice carried a moving honesty. "Today, I understand that true success lies in the lives we touch, in the connections we build, in the authenticity we maintain." Every day in this workshop taught me more than just mechanics. It taught me about humility, about respect, about the real value of things. The afternoon passed with stories being shared, laughter filling the workshop, and plans being woven for the future. Robert announced that he would begin documenting his memories, with contributions from Marcus and James, creating a living record of the evolution not only of mechanics but of the values that sustain the profession. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold, the group gathered for one final photo. Sarah captured the moment with her camera. 3 generations united not only by their love for cars but by a deep understanding of what truly matters in life. James Mercedes and Marcus Chevrolet, side by side, told a silent story of transformation and growth. They were no longer just cars. They were symbols of how life could bloom in unexpected directions when people chose to look beyond appearances. "James," Robert said softly as they watched Marcus passionately explain the Chevrolet's engine to some visitors, "you didn't just fix cars here. You helped fix hearts, reconnect families, restore dignity." This workshop has become a place of healing and transformation. The night gently descended upon the workshop as people began to say their goodbyes. Hugs were exchanged, promises made, connections strengthened. James stayed a moment longer, contemplating the space that had become so much more than a workplace. It was a sanctuary where people found their true value. The legacy they were building went far beyond cars and mechanics. It was a story of how respect, authenticity, and human connection could transform lives in deep and lasting ways. A story that would continue to inspire and touch hearts, reminding everyone that a person's true worth is never on the surface, but in the choices we make and the lives we touch along the way. Dear friends, stories like James and Marcus remind us that profound transformations can come from the most unexpected moments. If this journey of overcoming and discovery touched your heart, share your own experiences in the comments below. We all have stories of moments when we learn to look beyond appearances. Be part of our Life Stories family, a space where we share real stories that inspire and transform lives. Your like and subscription to the channel are not just numbers to us, they are bridges that connect us, allowing more stories like this to reach hearts around the world. Together, we can celebrate the beauty of genuine human connections and the transformative power of mutual understanding. Until our next life story.